Hello and welcome to Drop and Give Me 20 with Phil Riston. I am Phil Riston. If you're on YouTube, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you're on any podcast platform, please make sure to give me a nice 5-star rating and a nice little review. Something positive, I hope. Oh man, we got a lot of things going on this week. I'm actually coming to you guys on a Friday because I have a special interview episode. This week we have SNL's Vanessa Jackson, a good friend of mine. She's a great comedian, really, really funny person, very talented writer. And she actually got hired just this year to be a new writer for SNL. That's right. Saturday Night Live, 30 Rock, Lorne Michaels, Chris Farley, the whole bit, all these people. She's part of that now. She's doing this now. It's amazing. It's amazing for me just to see her as a friend kind of like rise up and do all this stuff. And you know what's crazy is I really wanted to interview her because we don't know each other that well. You know, I call her a friend, but I think it's just because she's such a friendly person and she's just so nice to be around. But in comedy, and I think in a lot of things, whether it's, you know, show business or, you know, the corporate world or whatever, when you guys have, you know, this similar goals and there's similar things that drive you, it's how you connect with each other. But a lot of times you don't really get to know the person directly next to you, you know? And she was one of those people. She was somebody that I would always see around, and we'd say hi and bye, and we'd have our short little talks and all that type of stuff. But I never really got to know the true Vanessa. And this podcast was a way for me to kind of get in there and really understand what makes her tick and know if we could kind of be friends. I mean, I think that's the beauty of podcasting, at least the podcast that I'm trying to make, is this is basically my way to try and make friends and see if half of the people that I know in my scene, or not even just the comedy scene, but in the world in general, I want to see if I relate to them, you know, what our understandings of life are, and compare notes and see what happens. So she was very, very interesting. We talked about a lot of different stuff. We talked about her life growing up in California. We talked a little bit about religion and spirituality towards the end. And we also talked tons and tons of shop talk about comedy, about the world of comedy writing, you know, what it feels like to be at different levels in comedy, and, you know, how she feels right now with the workload at SNL, and, you know, all that fun stuff. So stick around for a lot of those questions. I get into them pretty much immediately. We really got the ball rolling, so I know you're going to love this one. Please, you know, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Like I said, she's a great comedian. Make sure to follow her on Instagram also. I'm going to be posting her Instagram right up at the top, so make sure to follow her on Instagram as well, too. She's hilarious. You're going to love her. Give it up for Miss Vanessa Jackson. Hello, Vanessa Jackson. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Yeah, Vanessa Jackson, brand new writer for SNL. You know, amazing comedian. You know, great person in general. There's a lot of things I've been wanting to ask you. A lot of things, especially now that you got hired for Saturday Night Live. And I think the thing that's been burning in everybody's heart, the question that everybody wants to know is, are you dating Pete Davidson?
No, I am currently not. He is busy with Kim Kardashian, which seems lovely. So, yeah.
Well, you know, you never know with that guy. He's all over the place. He seems like a cool dude. He's charming, obviously. So
That is a fact. I mean, it's never out of the realm of possibility, honestly.
yeah, and you can give Kim Kardashian a run for her money, man. You know, you're a woman at the top of her field. Okay.
That is true. That is true. Although I think she just passed the bar. I mean, she has everything going for her right now.
I know. She's
I love that.
I'm jealous of her. It's ridiculous, but it's really good to see you, for real. I do this, you know, I do these podcasts and everything. This podcast, Dropping Give Me 20, is usually a solo podcast where I just kind of talk to the camera. So it's like a blog, or if you listen to it on a podcast, it's like a 20-minute podcast. But I've tried doing these kind of almost hour-long ones with guests, just because I want to get to know people, and especially like other comedians that I see around a lot better, you know? And you were kind of one of those people, you know, like I feel like I see you around, but I don't know that much about you and everything. Like, you know, you're a woman of mystery, Okay.
That is the part about comedy. It's so weird. You see like bits and pieces of people. So you're like, I think I know this person, but do I really?
Exactly. It's like all over the place, you know. So I guess let's start from the beginning. Where are you from?
Good question. I'm from Rancho Cucamonga, California.
Really?
Which is like an hour outside of LA. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I have. I've heard about it just because I used to watch Workaholics all the time. So
Interesting. Everybody has a different reference point, and it always tells me exactly who you are as a person. People, they say workaholics, bring it on, or Friday.
yeah, bring it on too. And Friday. Fuck, I forgot they're in. I thought they were in Compton in Friday. No,
They mention Rancho Cucamonga. There's something talked about in it.
that's so fucking funny. Yeah, you know what's funny is yeah, you that's surprising you're from the West Coast for whatever reason to me, because I always assumed, I don't know, that you were from like Chicago or something.
That is
You
so.
know,
You were the second person this week who thought I was from Chicago. That is so interesting.
because you have like a winter city person's like kind of attitude. Like you're good hearted and shit, you know.
Yeah.
But I can tell you don't take too much shit from other people. You know, there's something
Yeah.
about you that's really earnest, and I feel like you don't always get that from a lot of
Yeah.
California people. They're
Oh,
like,
that's so funny. A winter city. I have a winter city temperament. I'll go with it. That is, as long as it's nice.
yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's like the same
Yeah.
thing I see from people, you know, out in like New York or like, you know, Philly or something like that, you know, Boston, whatever. I'm like, there's something about you. I see you, and I'm just like immediately, I'm like, I wouldn't have never assumed something sunny.
Yeah, that's so funny. I would have never assumed something sunny. I love that for me.
Not at all. But I think, yeah, I just wanted to ask you where you're from, because like I was saying, you're one of those people that I would see a lot and I wouldn't know much about them. And I feel like too, like I was even doing some research on you, and that was hard. You
Love
know?
that.
Like I feel like you just like 2 years ago, you just like sprouted out of the trunk of a tree like the Lorax, and here you were to speak for the comedians, you know?
That's so funny. Yeah, I mean, before comedy, I don't really put stuff or use the internet as much. I do because I do like comedy or whatever, and I'm like
Mhm.
trying to build social following or stuff like that, but I don't really have things on the internet, I guess. You're right. So I started comedy, I think 3 or 4 years ago. So yeah, there wouldn't be much about me. Also, there was another Vanessa Jackson who like starved her children and was like a big
Oh.
news sensation. So I think she really has taken up a lot of clicks on Google.
Gotcha. Okay, so
Yeah.
she's in SAG. You had to,
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I'm just trying to like overpower her. And once I get to that level, I'll know I made it.
That's so fucking funny. Well,
Yeah.
number one, too, I didn't realize that you'd only been doing comedy for 3 or 4 years. So congratulations for
Yeah.
doing so much so quickly. Uh, because I think a lot of us think we can do that. I think especially when you're young, you think like, oh yeah, like Aziz Ansari did it in like 2 years, so I can just pop up and whatever. And then you don't realize how much actual effort it takes and the different things you need to do. So the fact that you understood that, got through it, and accomplished things is tremendous.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I know. Comedy is, especially stand-up comedy, it's one of those things where you're like, if somebody had told me all the things you must do before I did this, it's like an insane journey. It does. It feels like, I keep telling people, in some senses it feels very quick because it was, but then it also feels very long because you think about like all the mics you've sat at and all the like, yeah, all the like grind and the grit that you have to go through, that you're like, oh yeah, it's only been 3 years. It feels like a century.
Yeah, no, for real, man. It's a lot, dude. Also too, I wanted to say, like you were saying, you don't really before, SNL and stuff, you didn't really have that much of like a social presence and stuff. I've noticed that with like a lot of writers, like I feel like there's this side of writers that will be working for late night or something who will have had like a decent amount of social media, or you have those guys who put out YouTube sketches and then they blow up through that. But people don't realize that that's actually like a small percentage of, I feel like, a lot of people that are comedy writers. Like a lot of people that are comedy writers that I know that are working, they barely really put anything out. They just kept on submitting packets and just writing and writing,
Yeah.
Like, why do you think that is? Why do you think you guys mostly don't put shit out there?
That's a really good question. I would say that there's kind of like two different types. I'm just bad at social media, so I'm not even the type who doesn't put stuff out. I'm just bad at it because I'm like a writer performer, and so I want to do like stand up and like eventually in front of the camera stuff and things like that. So I should be putting more stuff out. But then I think there's also like a lot of just writer types. Like I know a
Yeah.
bunch of people who like have no aspiration to ever do any sort of performing. They're just purely writers, which
Yeah.
means they're writing pilots, they're writing stuff. I know some people who like started stand up to get in a writer's room. And then once they got it, they're like, all right, cool. I'm just going to like do this and be like in a room.
Yeah.
So I think it just kind of depends on like what your aspirations are. And if you're a person who's just purely like a writer, then you don't really need to do any of the other stuff because you're not really looking to like gain a brand or build anything on yourself. You're just looking to write for other people, you know?
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And I also think too, there's something to be said about people who kind of hone into one thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I think now people, everyone, like whether you're a comedian or you're a fucking doctor, whatever, because of social media and there's so many different outlets for people to express themselves, I think they feel the pressure to express themselves in a million different ways rather than kind of concentrating just on one or even like two or three and kind of seeing how that goes. You know, like, do you think because you kind of slow down on that side of the social media side, do you think that actually helped you? You know?
I don't know. That's a good question. Not more or less, I think. I think for me, it's just like more of a thing of like, I love stand up and what I do is stand up. So I like want to put more clips and stuff online, but I don't know if I'm necessarily like a front face in camera kind of person where people do like the characters and stuff on
Yeah.
there. So for me, I think social media is like very important in general, but again, it really just depends on like what your aspirations are. Like I said, for people who are just like writers, which is a little bit of like the old guard, you know, where like
Yeah.
people sit in coffee shops for hours and they sit on their
Like
computers and then
clacking on a typewriter.
yes, exactly. And then they get a literary agent and they send out their scripts everywhere and then they're writing a movie and writing a thing like that. So that's your aspiration. I guess you don't really need social media as much because you're just trying to be in a room or get staffed on a show. I think like the social media thing is also for like yeah, I don't know. This whole thing about comedy, I always tell people it's a big thing is like getting very clear on what you want early, I think really, really helps. Cause like you said, there's so many different things that you can do. But yeah, just giving yourself kind of, and again, you can always pivot and switch and do whatever you want, but giving yourself kind of a guideline early of like, all right, this is what I want to hone in on.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And I think there's number one, I think a lot of things that people don't realize, and I'm only realizing this now as I'm trying to build more digitally, is that
Mhm.
a lot of this stuff takes a lot of time and like a lot of work. And that's really why you got to decide what you want because you can't spread yourself too thin. Like we all see those like, comedians performing on stage and there's like subtitled and they put them on TikTok or they put them on Instagram and stuff like that. And it
Uh,
seems like 15 seconds and it's nice and easy, but it's hard. Like even with the auto cap technology, like apps that you have, you still have to totally go back and comb through everything, make sure it hits right. It'll take you to get like a 30-second clip or whatever.
uh,
It'll take you like maybe like an hour to really like put the thing together and make it look nice and all that shit just for like 15 to 30 seconds.
100%. I mean, I always tell people,
Crazy.
I think, yeah, the worst thing is when you film a thing and then you're like, oh yeah, I did a 10-minute set. And then you're like, I have to go watch that 10-minute
I
set to get
know.
30 seconds. And then you have
Uh,
to caption it, which there's yeah, I wish someone would come up with a much simpler way to caption things. I have yet to
Me too.
find a good service where you're like, okay, cool. Now it's captioned.
We should
It's
get
so
honestly,
annoying.
we should get in on this because I've been talking to a couple different comedians about this because I think
Yeah.
that's a perfect way for the market too because it's like we're such a niche group of people,
Uh-huh.
but that type of social media is never going to go away. Like
Yeah.
at least not for the next like 20, 30 years. Like even if it changes different platforms and shit, like subtitle shit and those super short videos, it's not going. So if we can find some sort of algorithm to almost like sample the laugh and then remove it and just listen to the dialogue, I feel like that would change everything.
For reals. It would
Everything.
be if I had any was tech savvy at all, I would totally do that. I am not. So it's one of those things where I'm like,
PhD in dick jokes. That's me.
I know. Yeah. I'm like, if anybody wants to steal this idea and make $1 million, please go right ahead.
That's what I'm saying. I always get like wowed by those comedians who were like amazing at one other thing and then just decided to do stand up, like who was it, like Isabel Hagen? She was like, she went to Juilliard for the viola.
Yeah.
She even performed on Jimmy Fallon like way before she was doing comedy, just on the late night show for how good she was at that instrument. And then she's like, all right, well, I'm going to do stand up now.
And now I'm going to do this and also be a great joke writer and comedian. You're like, cool.
Yeah, it's like, well, fuck you, man.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah, it's fucking wild. But let's go back to more, a little bit more about you. Like, tell me about your parents. Like, what did they do? Are they together? Were they together?
Yeah, my parents are together, and I think they've been married for like 35 years now. I think that's correct. Wow. They met at like I want to say, what was it? It was like a place called Best Products, which is like very similar to like Best Buy. Okay. They both worked there together, met, had 4 of us. I have 3 siblings, which is great. An older brother, an older sister, and a younger sister. And then, they've been together, and it's always funny because I came from like a very suburban, like 2 parents household, which just feels like very opposite of like most comedians. I'm always like, what drama?
I was going to say that too. Like you are like, I was almost going to, not throwing shade, but going to be like, oh, you're one of those comedians.
You're well adjusted. Interesting.
Yeah. You're like, how are you still here? Like what made you think like I have to tell things to people? Right. But I don't, what's crazy though, is you talking about that, but I also feel like that's changed so much in the last like 15 to 20 years. If you were talking to a comic who came up in the 80s or the 90s, they'd be like, they tell you some crazy story. Like my mom was a prostitute and, my dad was never around. And, and I was, all I did was perform at the nightclub that my mom turned tricks at. And, and I
exactly.
At 12.
Yes. I was raised in a club. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
100%.
And now I think it's because of like YouTube and all those other things. And honestly, just seeing those people, like those wounded soldiers become such prolific people and become so big, it just made everybody, get inspired. And I think a lot more people are doing it. And also too, I think there's just no industry in America anymore. So the only industry we make is entertainment, which is a big thing.
Yeah. No, it's true. I think again, the internet has just like lowered the barrier to entry in that sense of like, you can just be funny and like make stuff and it's totally fine. And you don't have to come from like a scarred background, which is kind of nice, I think.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's good and bad. I think there's there's edges to it because it's like, it's a great thing because you want people to be well adjusted and, and cool and not have to be so just, reactionary or angry or whatever emotional problems they have. But the one con of that is I think you do get sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you get a lot of like very privileged kids that end up kind of boxing everybody out. Like comedy, every year comedy is less and less for the misfit toys of the world. And it's almost a little sacrilegious because it's like, that's how it got started. Like a lot of comedy does come from pain and that type of shit. So to tell those people that like, we don't like what you do, or, I'm not going to, get on a soapbox because sometimes people say the wrong things because they come from the wrong backgrounds and shit like that. But just being like, we don't like what you do. We don't like what you represent. And we don't like what you say. And it's like, yeah, but you got to realize you were taught all the right things to do and say and act, Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
like, there needs to be a balance, I think.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I think at least what I found and what I hope is that like the funny in the end like wins out,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
if
yeah.
you're if enough people relate to your idea, it doesn't have to necessarily be like the most socially conformed like
Yeah.
thought, because if it's true, and that's the thing about comedy is like if it rings true and people relate and they laugh about it, then like you can pretty much say. That's why I always think it's funny. I always hear people in like mics or at shows or whatever, and they're like say something risque or whatever, and then they're like, oh, you guys don't get it, and you're like, no, sometimes it just literally wasn't funny. Like
Yeah, it's like we
I
totally
am on,
understand you.
yes, I'm on the side of like, you can make anything funny, truly, but like if it's a well-crafted joke, like
Yes.
sometimes people just say out of pocket sentences and you're like, that was just words constructed together. It wasn't a joke.
No, that's
Um,
absolutely true.
yeah. So yeah, no, for sure. I agree. There's a huge balance.
No, that's definitely true. I will say that like, there definitely, has to be balance. You got to be good enough, I think, to push out your product and people not to care where you're from or, even your types of views. Like there are people, that are on certain podcast networks and shit like that that say all sorts of fucked up shit. And I'm not necessarily a fan of them, but I can't deny that they are funny. I don't like what they say, but I'm like, fuck,
Yeah.
that was a
Yeah.
funny
You're
point,
like, yes, exactly. They're like, that was hilarious. Don't agree
completely
with it,
wrong.
but you made me giggle.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's the whole thing. I think that's so beautiful about comedy is like it's so involuntary, it's so visceral, you know?
Yeah.
And I
Uh-huh.
think there's sometimes that people try to deny that part of themselves where they try to like
Yes.
lobotomize comedy in this weird way. But I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I have to everything you say I have to process and then I have to decide if it's okay to laugh. And it's like,
Yeah. And that's always the worst. Like you can just outright laugh. It's fine.
yeah, like that's why black comedy shows and like black comics I feel like are almost like eternal. You know what I mean? There's something that they have that is so like that anybody can cling to because it's just like it's all about just being the funniest possible. It's they try like black comedians we try to be clever and this that, and the third, sure, but it's all about how funny the shit is. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, man. Also too, so let's go back to your family, your parents. What did they do? What were their jobs?
My dad is computer programmer, and then my mom is like an insurance claims examiner.
Okay, so very, very like stern. I feel like stoic job occupations.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. They do have like a lot of like my dad also like coaches basketball at a high school, and my mom like sings. She does like stuff. We have a minor league baseball stadium where I live, and she does like the national anthems there and like sings in the choir.
Oh
So they
wow.
both kind of have like creative stuff, but they also like what they do. For the most part, but yeah, none of them came from like a background where it's like, oh, they're an actor, or they used to be a ballet dancer, or
Yeah, they had dreams of
yeah,
being a star. And
yes, exactly. No.
that's interesting though. Like, do you think maybe that kind of upbringing, like I think maybe the mix of the kind of more creative type stuff, like your mother does and stuff like that, but the more like
Uh,
binary stuff of like computer engineering and
mhm.
insurance, sales and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Do you think that's kind of what helped mold you in the thought of like, yes, I'm going to be a comedian, but I'm going to be a writer, because that's like writing's binary, but being a comedian is just like a spin art. It's like it's a
Oh,
collage.
yeah.
you know
That's interesting. I don't think so. I always feel like I came to comedy kind of like out of left field in a weird way. Like
Mhm.
it wasn't really necessarily the thing that I was aiming towards. Like I found it just purely off of discovering that I really loved writing jokes and I really loved being on stage and like performing for people. So I don't think I ever really thought, because I know a lot of people now, especially with like what I do, everyone's always like, okay, so was that the goal? And like, are you going to quit stand up, or was I always have just gone with like what I enjoy. And I like started doing comedy and writing jokes and doing stand up. And then I found that like, oh, I also like writing sketch. So I started writing sketch and like writing on like a sketch team and things like that. So it's so funny because everyone always asks was like, oh, your parents, were they like worried when you started doing stand up and
Yeah.
stuff? I started so randomly and not even in a way that was like, I'm now a stand up comedian, that I think before any of us even figured out what I was doing, I was already doing it,
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there was never one of
Too
those
late.
moments, yeah, where I like sat down my parents and was like, I'm doing stand up comedy. It was just like, I was out in LA. I was doing stuff like trying to like do entertainment hosting, like Juliana Rancic or like Ryan Seacrest kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then discovered that I liked doing comedy. And so then I was like, oh, I'll take a stand-up class. And they were like, cool. And so I did that and then discovered that I love stand-up. And then I was like, oh, I think I'm also going to take like a sketch class, maybe improv. And they were like, cool. And so then from like taking those classes like after work and stuff and just like getting involved, it slowly actually became like a real thing. And then by the time I got like I was always just working jobs and stuff. So there was never like a big, I'm now a stand-up comedian, like coming out moment. It was just like, I kept following my passions and I was like, oh, cool. And here we are,
Well, that's a good thing about stand-up though, too. And I think just comedy in general though, is that it can kind of be, it's not like comedy is almost like tofu. It can mix in with anything, like you can do it. Like you said, you were kind of starting on like being a presenter and kind of an event host, and some people might only stick with that. But if you do stand up, or if you do just comedy in general, you can still do that. I mean, every time for the Oscars, they have a different comedian or they different, person, So that's really, really interesting. Are you still into that type of stuff? Like, are you trying to be on Extra someday?
No, but I would eventually love to like host an award show or like my own late night show.
Nice.
Or things like that of that nature. So I feel like that kind of combines it. But the thing about those things is you have to be like red carpet stuff. You have to be charming, not funny. You have to be very like, hello, I have a good personality, but it's not taking up the show. It's not in your face,
Yeah. Well, speaking of charming and charming, not funny, have you offended any celebrities backstage yet by making some weird joke?
No, I know, right? No, not at all. I'm the complete opposite. I'm like, let me think of every thought that I'm going to say before I say it and keep my mouth shut. If I have no other good qualities, it is one of them is that I'm very self-aware.
That's good. A lot of comedians are not.
Oh yeah, I would say most comedians are not at all. It's half of the battle is being like, are people enjoying this? And be like, they are not at all. So, and I've seen a lot of those.
Oh yeah, constantly. I've been the star of a couple of those as well.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you too, like, so how is it backstage, like the atmosphere, like before the show? What's the usual schedule like for SNL? Like, I know you guys start dress rehearsal on like Thursday, right?
No, but we like run through the show the first couple days before the show actually goes live on Saturdays. So we're like running through and blocking. We have like a writing night that we do on Tuesdays. It's a lot of long hours, but a lot of fun. I mean, they hired on like 10 new writers this year. So everyone is just like very collaborative. We're all new. So we're all kind of like figuring it out and helping out each other out a lot, which has been very good. And I think that's been very helpful. There's a lot of like really, really cool, like different voices on staff this year. And like people who have different voices than me, which like helps me write a lot. But yeah, the energy is like, I mean, there's nothing like a live show, it's always fun, even like with stand up or like anything. It's always fun and exciting to be like, I feel like it just infuses a lot more of just excitement because you're like, oh, people are grabbing things and this person's got to go get their wig and you got to move out of the way because someone is like running to go to their next scene. And so that's really, really cool. It's very energetic, very like alive, and like all these things being thrown around, and like you got to just like catch things and do them on the fly, which is fun. It keeps me on my toes. You're never bored. Truly.
That's really cool. Like I feel like that's the main allure for me as well, like because I write as well, like I write scripts and stuff like that, but I'm not gonna lie, like I've always wanted to do something like late night or like SNL because of that aspect of it, the real like, live kind of part, where to me it's like that is writing, but it's the closest you can get to stand-up comedy almost while writing. And you might be doing improv and sketch during that, but it's really just the atmosphere of just like, you're here, this is your show, if something goes wrong you try to fix it, if not, it just is what it is, and we'll see you back next week.
Yes. Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Is there anybody you like look up to specifically that that's on the cast right now?
I mean, truly, it's going to sound so corny, but all of them. I think it's like one of those things where it's just surreal to be like working with everyone on staff. Everyone has been like very, very nice. And I think it's because we all work so closely together. That it's just like there's nobody who, they say like don't meet your heroes usually, but this was one of those situations where it's like everyone is truly just like very great, very chill. Nobody's like, hey, hi, hey, oh, you know what I mean? Nobody's like in your face or anything. So it's just been like cool to work around people who you like have seen for years. I think I especially geek out over like Kenan Thompson just because I feel like he's such like a cultural icon, especially like
Yeah.
as a Black person growing up in the early thousands and like all that and like
Yeah.
Nickelodeon and like he kind of ruled the scene. So it's really cool. Anytime I get to write anything and I can like put him as like a character in it or something, I'm always like, he crushes it every single time. And my little 90s loving heart is like so excited about it.
That's amazing, dude. That's really amazing. So what, like, as far as writing goes, I wanted to ask this question because I get a lot of people who watch the show or listen to the podcast and want to know more about like technical stuff when it comes to like comedy and everything like that. So can I ask you, do you write every day?
I do. I do. Not the same things every day. I don't have like, I'm trying to get on like Seinfeld's level where
Yeah,
it's like,
I know. He's a
okay,
maniac.
I know, which is
Ridiculous.
incredible. Yeah. I do. I always try to say, I, I definitely, like I said, fancy myself as like writer performer. So I'm always doing something related to like my goals or what I want to do. I feel like especially with comedy, it's very easy to get lost in the mix of like doing things that aren't really comedy but are close to them. And
Yeah.
like people who are like hanging at comedy shows, which is awesome and you should do. But like sometimes people hang more than they do like
Oh yeah.
actually get on stage. And so I think there's a lot of things where like people are like, yeah, I'm constantly listening to comedy albums. And you're like, but how often are you writing? And so I
Yeah.
try to like check myself on that and like, okay, did I actually do something that's honing my craft today? Or did I do something that I thought was close, but really wasn't? And so I definitely try to like write or like watch a tape that I've done and see how I can improve on stage or yeah, I've always tried to do those kind of things.
No, I think that's legit because I just asked that question because, number one, I've had a couple different people that I've interviewed, and the answer is always kind of different. It's either like, yes, I do, and I do it all the time, or like, no, I just
Uh-huh.
let things come to me, or somewhere in the middle.
Uh-huh.
But I also feel like it helps. Like the reason I kind of make this podcast is to help people, who have the same anxieties as me when it
Yeah.
comes to this type of shit. And that was always my problem, where like I wouldn't write every day, or I'd feel bad that I wasn't doing enough, even if I was writing every day and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
And it just goes to show that I think different people have different mindsets, and you can still be successful and driven, as long as you just care about what you're doing and you're going in the right direction. You
Yeah,
know?
I always say, especially with like this, you just got to do what works for you. I think there's too much emphasis on people trying to take what other people are doing and like formulating it for themselves. And I say, if you see something that works for somebody else, figure out also like how you can make it work for you in a way that does. If like sitting down and writing for 3 hours is the thing that like gets you the best material, do that. If like writing on stage helps you, I always say do that. But it's like more so just like do what works for you, which sounds so simple, but it's
I
always
know.
like also not always the most simple, but it is because I found myself just like stressing about attempting to do things that like other people are doing. And I'm like, well, they're doing it, so it must be the thing to do. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, the originality, I think, wins out in the end the most. So like try to be as original with your process as you are with like your actual craft, I think.
No, I get that. And I feel like, you said like it's simple, but not that simple. And I have a kind of like saying where I'll say stuff like that, like, work hard or something. And I'll be like,
Uh,
it's simple, but not easy, you know?
yes, exactly.
And that's what it is. It's like the answer is incredibly simple. It's like all you have to do, you're like, oh, you want to go far, like work hard, be nice to people,
Uh,
and things will come to you. But like that's not an easy thing to do, like
uh,
working hard takes waking up every day and trying to push yourself forward in some way. It might not be writing, but just pushing yourself forward. And being nice to people sucks because comedians can be dicks sometimes.
yeah.
you know
Yeah,
so
100%.
it drains you. It drains you.
Hmm.
But I just I want to say I really admire like how positive of a person you really are. Like
Oh, thank you.
I feel like it's kind of rare. Like, it's getting better in comedy now, but like it's kind of hard to meet people who are like kind of that cool, especially in the stage I think where you're at, where you said you've been doing it like 3 to 4 years.
Hmm.
I feel like it's usually like when you're in your first like 1 or 2 years, you're like really nice and like really like everybody, we all play together, you know?
Uh,
And then once
yeah.
you get to like year like 3, 4, 5, that's when you're like kind of more bitter or whatever. And then by the time you hit maybe like 10 years or like 11 years, you're either just fully bitter or you're back to being nice and you're like, none of this matters. And it's just all about caring about things, you know?
Yeah, it's hard not to become jaded. And I feel like, especially with stand-up comedy, and I think it's because you're like putting so much energy and effort. And like also you have to do your job at the times when other people are just like chilling and hanging out and
Yeah.
relaxing. And so it's hard not to become bitter. So I sort of understand it, but I try to keep that positive outlook because of that, because I'm like, oh, we're all so sad. Why is this?
Is there anything you do specifically to kind of try and to either calm down your anxieties you might have, like not even just with comedy, like throughout like life, you know what I mean? Is there anything you do to kind of calm yourself down, kind of bring you back to earth and kind of, settle down a bit?
I'm a big believer in God, so I do a lot of like listening to worship music or that kind of thing, or like sitting in prayer is a big thing for me. But I also just like kind of as corny as it is, like you gotta remind yourself of like how far you've come. So I'm a big fan of like keeping lists of like things that you've done or like things that you're proud of, no matter if they're like super small or whatever. I think you just again, when you're going through it, it all feels so long and so hard. And so I'm like, give yourself like a chance to remind yourself that you have had some wins along the way. Because when it gets like down or you're in like a low season, you forget like, oh yeah, I've done some stuff. I've accomplished some things, you know?
No, I totally get that. I mean, like for me, I kind of try to like bring myself back to earth by kind of whenever I'm feeling down, I'll tell myself like, do you realize that like 10-year-old you would be so impressed by what you're doing?
Yeah.
It's like to me, oh, I live in an apartment and I have like 3 other roommates or whatever. But
Uh,
to 10-year-old me who wanted to be a comedian back then, he's like, you do stand-up comedy and you have like, what's a podcast? That's crazy. Whoa,
yeah, it's so
somebody from this
true.
show. Oh, that's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. 100%.
it's just so interesting, man. And definitely, I'm not very religious, but I am starting to get back into that type of stuff and just spirituality in general, and also just taking a breath, shutting down all the computers, all the screens. Like sometimes after I write a lot or after I podcast or I post a lot, I'll just turn everything off and I'll just like sit and I'll just like lay there, like not even listen to music, just like complete silence and just
Yeah.
enjoy being here,
That's awesome.
like
Yeah.
not doing anything.
I, lo- I love that. That's smart. Sometimes you have to. There's not enough emphasis on self-care.
there isn't. There isn't. Like, who is it? Eddie Murphy. I was watching him on Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, and he was talking about how in his house he has one specific room that's just an empty room. There's literally nothing in it whatsoever.
Mhm.
And I believe he said like he painted it like sky blue or something, and there's nothing in it. And he just goes in there and he just lays on the floor and just stares at the ceiling. And he's like, it's the most calming thing I do
Yeah.
throughout my day. And I'm like, I totally get that. I totally
Yeah.
fucking get that.
Truly. Sometimes you just got to do it. You got to like pause and
Yeah.
just take stock of everything.
That's what I'm saying. It's like I feel like personally I'm one of the laziest people I know, but
Mhm.
because of what I love, I end up pushing myself to do a lot of shit, you
Yeah.
know? And
Uh-huh.
I think it causes more anxiety than I want. So
Yeah.
to kind of do that, it kind of helps me like be like, all right, whew, I'm not doing anything.
Yes. I'm okay.
Yeah,
That's so
yeah.
true.
I'm okay. I'm okay. What else was I gonna ask you? So now that you're kind of, more established and stuff, do you have any other like kind of thoughts about what you want to do for your future? Do you think you want to stay at SNL for a long time? Do you think you maybe want to try and like write your own series type shit, or
Yeah.
what's the next step?
Yeah, good question. I mean, all the things, pretty much. I definitely want to stay at SNL for a few seasons at least. That would be awesome to get invited back, just because it's like so much fun and I'm learning a ton and it's been just awesome. So that would be the hope for sure. And then yeah, like I said, eventually I want to do like hosting my own late night show or just like more opportunities to do things like that. I would love to like film some of my stand up and actually like get like a small set on like Comedy Central or something, or do a special one day. So yeah, my aspirations are all over the place, and sometimes I'm like, I should rein them in. But
No, I think that's awesome. I mean, especially I think nowadays it's, well, we can all feel so isolated because of social media and stuff like that. So I think it's really nice to have such a large vision board of the things that you want,
yeah,
and they
uh-huh,
don't always have to come right then and there. You can just take time.
exactly.
Like you were also talking about too, spirituality and stuff, and kind of being a Christian, or at least worship music and stuff like that. Does that
Uh-huh.
play a big role in your life?
Oh yeah, it does for sure. I think that's part of like how I stay so grounded, which also again is like against the whole comedian thing. I'm
Yeah.
I'm an antithesis to comedy in and of itself, but I like it that way. It keeps me grounded for sure. I try to like attend church on Sundays. It's a little bit harder with like the job because
Yeah.
we're like out to like 3 4 a.m.
I know. Yeah.
On Saturdays, which is crazy. But yeah, I think that's just the thing that like keeps me balanced is my faith for sure.
No, that's amazing, man. Like, do you find it kind of not necessarily hard, but just a little bit more challenging because, like, nowadays Christianity and just spirituality in general is changing so much. Like, I feel like,
Uh-huh.
10, 20 years ago, someone who was religious, like if they're a Muslim or something, would mean like, I never drink anything and I don't do this and I
Yeah.
don't do that. Now you meet somebody who's Muslim and, they might have a drink every once in a while, or they're a little bit more open to people in the other way that they live their lives. And same with
Uh-huh.
Christianity. I mean, you have the fundamentalists, Westboro Baptist Church, sure, but there's a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
more young people becoming more open. But do you find it kind of like hard to do such like a, I don't know, kind of like such a secular job? Like, do people in your community or in your congregation kind of like judge you a little bit because of that type of stuff?
No, not at all, actually. I mean, I don't really find it that challenging. Um, yeah, at all. But I know I totally get what you're saying, where you're coming from. I think for me, I like try to practice. I don't know. Sometimes with Christianity, I feel like a lot of it has been misunderstood over the course of the years.
I agree.
But I just feel like the Bible is all about love and about being around people and spreading love and spreading yeah, so I think for me it's not hard at all because I don't come at it at all from like a hateful place. Like I'm not like a person who's, I think it would be hard if I came at it from like a very judgmental place or was one of those people who was like, wow, I feel like my faith is my own, and like I love to hear other people's ideas and I love to converse with other people about their ideas and what they think in spirituality. I love talking about that kind of stuff. So I've never really approached it from like a, I'm right, you're wrong, okay, like perspective. I just approach it from like, this is what works for me. This is my personal relationship with God. If it doesn't work for you, more power to you. Go live your best life. Do what you
Yeah.
got to do. I'm just out here trying to do what I think is best for me and what I feel, yeah, works for me. But yeah, no, I've experienced those people in general, in just across the board, obviously.
Mhm.
But I don't really hang out with those people. I'm not around people who would be like, "Oh, comedy, interesting."
Well, that's the thing too. I feel like so much, when it comes to like being judgmental or just, judgment and stuff, I think so much of that gets thrown onto religion,
Uh-huh.
but people hate to, admit that we all have that in us. You
Oh yeah,
know,
for sure.
there are people that are atheists who are the same way, who are just like,
Yeah.
oh, you do this, whatever. Especially right now, we're in the age of judgment. you know,
Yes. What?
where
Uh-huh.
everyone's exposed and we all get to anonymously attack them and say how we don't like the way they're living, even though we could be living the exact same way, and we're just
Yeah.
ashamed by that, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And it's
100%.
it's
I
crazy.
always say one of my favorite quotes is from Amy Poehler's book, Yes, Please. And she writes, I think a lot of people would be like better off if we just said like, good for you, not for me. And I truly, that's just how I approach life. Good for you, not for me, or vice versa. Like,
Yeah.
go on about your business.
Well, you said again, I want to keep on like the spirituality part because I think like I feel like this is really interesting. So have you know, speaking of spirituality and stuff, have you ever done any like psychedelic drugs or any stuff like that or no?
No, I haven't. Like ayahuasca, things like that.
Ayahuasca
I
or mushrooms or acid or DMT or you know,
no, I
sorry, that's a
haven't.
long list.
Yeah, I know. He's like, any of these? Any? Please do tell.
Ketamine.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I have not.
Really? I
Yeah.
actually I guess it doesn't surprise me, but you seem like such a cool, calm, and collected person. And now
Uh-huh.
when I meet somebody like that, I'm like, they've definitely done drugs.
That's so funny.
Because the
Like
world is
always have
psycho now. So I'm like, the
yes.
only way you could be calm is if you met God and shook his hand. You know?
That's so funny. I know. I wish I had more of like not as like, oh, on paper you seem this way, and then actually, but it's always like, no, that's it.
Yeah, yeah. But it's good though. I think that's a really good quality in certain ways. I mean, you know,
Yeah,
like there sometimes there is a benefit to the book and the cover being the same thing.
that's true.
You
That is
know,
very true.
like because yeah, sure, it's pleasant sometimes when you think somebody's super straight laced and then they're like a little crazy or a little wild. But most of the
Yeah.
time, you know, it goes the other way and it's not great, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh shit.
Yes.
You know,
That is very true.
You know, it's like you're like this. I don't know if I want to do that. You know,
Yeah.
you
Like you
know?
are out of your mind.
But yeah, man, yeah, I was just asking about all that because like you know, I've done a lot of those types of things and everything, and I'm a spiritual person. I'm just into like kind of exploring like connections and stuff like that. And I don't know, I just you know, I guess I won't say like I envy people that are that don't have to do that, but it always is very interesting to me because I'm like, I want to know what someone's perspective is like when they
Uh-huh.
haven't, you know, done that, but still have the faith of what the
Yeah.
world is. Because I was a little bit, you know, when I was younger, you know, and like super young, I went to Christian camp and I went to youth group and all that type of stuff. And, you know, it meant a lot to me. But as I got older, it's kind of started to fade away. And I was like, I don't know. I'm still spiritual, but I'm not sure what's going on here. And I
Uh-huh.
will say through like, you know, therapy and stuff too, but through like psychedelics and stuff, like I definitely started to kind of have that faith rekindled in a real way, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's just so I don't know, it's just so interesting to me. I'm on a
Yeah.
tangent. But.
No, that's kind of an interesting, unique perspective. Yeah, I never thought about it that way. Like I said, if that's what's working for you, keep
Yeah.
up.
I
I
mean, I
love
haven't
it.
done psychedelics in years now, which is kind of crazy,
Yeah.
but you know, it really helped me. It set me on a right path. Like I think it's so interesting. Like you see those documentaries of like the 60s and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, a lot of like cults and stuff would use like acid and stuff and all that. And I'm like, that's terrible. But I wish there was more like actual like spiritual or like religious groups that did use that stuff to connect more with God. Cause I think it would be just a lot more like the, you know, the things that you're talking about, where they would shed a lot of the, you know, bullshit that I think a lot of religions have against like this type of person can't do this or you can't do this. And, you know, I feel like a lot of religion has to do with kind of a checklist, you
Mhm.
know, or organized religion really is like more of a checklist of just like this, and this. If you don't have that, then sorry, you're not in the club, you know?
Yeah.
But really, where it all stemmed from, all religions stem from love, just like you're saying, and an understanding to a higher power and a connection with the people around you. And I feel like if some people did, you know, if you went to church services and they gave you some fucking mushrooms, I think certain people would realize that a little bit quicker. you know?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I never thought about it, but with like everything being so niche and like I'm sure there will be a few of those popping up in the next like few years because everybody is like I think that is the most fascinating thing about our generation specifically
Yeah.
too. It's like you almost at this point we've designed it so you don't almost have to hang around anyone you don't like or who
Yes.
doesn't, you know what I mean, believe exactly and like almost to a very specific level. Like there's always you can Google things if you want something or want to find something, you can almost Google anything and find it. And that is so fascinating to me.
No,
Or like,
yeah.
I'm sure there's like a Facebook group of that, or, there's always something random where you're like, oh, I didn't know there was a meetup for that or an Eventbrite link.
Yeah.
So interesting.
It's very interesting. I mean, I also feel like kind of a new agey church is kind of a new thing that's kind of
Yeah,
coming
for
into
sure.
fashion. It has been for the last couple of years, like Unitarian, churches
Mhm.
and stuff like that. And my mom is kind of more into that too, because she used to be a very like devout Christian and stuff like that. And
Uh-huh.
she still is, but like we were like devout, where it's like, my older brother and sister, they weren't allowed to watch like Smurfs because she was like, has like witchcraft in it and stuff like that. She's
Yeah.
Jamaican, so she's like, when she's about it, she's about it.
Yeah, she knows.
And like, I wasn't allowed to watch Harry Potter because it's witchcraft and all that type of stuff. And
Yeah.
then as Trump got in office and everything, she was already kind of getting annoyed by like Westboro Baptist Church type stuff and like
Uh-huh.
Christian fundamentalism. And like because of Trump and him just kind of weaponizing Christianity against people and being like, well, like, I'm friends with Christians and I care about what you care about, and because you have faith, you all agree that Mexicans shouldn't be in here too, right? That
Uh-huh.
type of
Yeah.
stuff. And she kind of got a little bit, pulled away from it. But now she goes to like a Unitarian church. She, talks to the pastor and stuff. So I think you're right. I think there's a lot of space for a lot of people who want to just be open and still want to be open to
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. Is your mom in the city or where does she live?
She lives down in Florida, actually.
Oh, is that where you're from? I didn't even ask you.
No, no, no. I'm from New Jersey originally. I was
Huh.
born and raised in Jersey, and then she moved down to Florida like 10 years ago. Uh,
Oh.
yeah, yeah, yeah. My aunt had a condo down there, and unfortunately, she passed away like 15 or 20 years ago, and
Oh.
so that space was just left open for like years, and she had like paid it off and everything. So my mom was like, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna leave and do this." So, you know,
That's
yeah, she
cool.
just did
Good
it.
for
Yeah,
her.
I'm super proud of her. She's great. She's awesome. It's always nice to go down there too because I have a lot of family in like West Palm Beach and like Miami and all that type of stuff. What about you? Do you have family around? Like are you guys all? What's like the lineage of your family? Are you guys like just straight up from California for generations, or where were your parents from?
They are from California. They're both have been living there for like years. My dad's family also a little bit from the East Coast. Actually, same with my mom a little bit, but they're like pretty much California kids. Yeah, pretty much my whole family is in California.
Really? Well, I
Yeah,
guess I mean, California is like 90% of the West Coast, so.
yeah, I know. That is true. That is
So
true.
that's
So
not
it's
so
kind of
surprising,
hard.
but that's still cool.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
It's nice. Everyone's like always around for like the holidays and stuff, which is awesome.
that's really great. That's really great. Are you going back for Christmas?
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. It'll be good. I haven't been back in a few months.
Nice. Well, this time when your uncle or something asks about your little comedy skits, he'll
I know.
actually be correct. So
Exactly. Right? Finally, I'll be like, oh, I have a job now.
yeah, he'll be like, "I told you you should have talked to Lord Michaels." You know. So that'll be
I
nice.
know that is true because that's the thing comedians always get. It's like, have you heard of that show SNL? You should do that. You're
Yeah,
like,
it's
oh,
like, oh,
cool.
great. Yeah, I guess I'll just walk through the door. You know.
I'll get right on it.
Actually, speaking of that, and we're kind of winding down here, but speaking of SNL, how is Lorne Michaels? Because like you always hear stories about the guy, and you're brand new. So what's your take on
Yeah.
it?
I mean, he's great. So far, he's been awesome. I've only gotten to talk to him a few times, but he's still, even to this day, so involved with the process and like has final say on everything. He's there every day. So yeah, I mean, that's been the coolest part, especially as someone who like wants to do a lot in this industry, to just see someone still like working and still passionate about it and still passionate about comedy, which I think is the coolest part too. He really is like a tried and true like comedy writer at heart. And so that's been also like just a cool example to see. It's like, yeah, he still just loves jokes and loves like making jokes and yeah, being funny with the cast, which is really, really cool to see.
That's fucking awesome, man. Like yeah, I've always been like really inspired by that guy and like I've paid attention to his career and everything. So that's really,
Yeah.
really cool that you get to work with him. And I'm so happy for everything that's going on with you. I wish you a lot of success in the future. And I feel like I
Thank
don't even
you.
have to wish it. It'll happen. Real.
But I appreciate it. It always helps, you know.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, I guess we're gonna end the interview here. Thank you for hanging out and everything. Is there anything you want to say? You have any dates coming up or anything? Because I'm putting this out on Friday. So
Oh, perfect. Yeah, just follow me on socials. I'll be around. I perform a lot at like Greenwich Village Comedy Club. That's like my home club in New York City, and I'll be there a lot during like January, February. So yeah, come out to a show.
all right, cool. Maybe I'll see you around because I'm doing
Yeah.
a lot of stuff at Broadway and Greenwich too. So
Oh, yay, that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, rubbing a little bit of comedy elbows out there.
Yeah, I love that.
All right. Well, Vanessa, I'll see you later. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. And guys, this has been Drop and Give Me 20. I'm Phil Risen. I'll see you later. Peace.